broadcasting from the Unshackled Studios in Melbourne. This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
Hello everybody and welcome to this special WilmsFront Snapshot news program coming to you on this budget night, Tuesday the 12th of May 2026. We are streaming live on the WilmsFront YouTube channel. Hello to everyone in the chat. It is 8 p.m. here in Melbourne, Victoria, where the biggest story on the news tonight was not the budget that Jim Chalmers has just delivered. I am going to react to the budget papers in real time. Well, I haven't actually read them because I wasn't in the 5-hour budget lockup like the mainstream media journalists, but I'm going to go through the summaries that those journalists have put together, and also I watched the Treasurer's speech as well. But the biggest story here in Melbourne was the resignation of the Carlton coach, Michael Voss. So forget about the federal budget, more debt and deficits, broken election promises. Also forget in Melbourne about... Also forget about in Melbourne the machetes, all the restaurants and nightclubs that are being hit in arson attacks. It's all about Michael Voss resigning or being pushed as the coach of Carlton. That's Melbourne for you. It's all about the footy. Now on to the federal budget, the most important thing tonight. So we already knew that there was going to be changes, significant. When I say changes, significant rolling back to a negative gearing, which is that you can deduct the losses on an investment property from your taxable income. And it was, even though we got the final news tonight, it did leak out a couple of hours in advance. So negative gearing, those who existed already negatively gear an investment property, they will be what's termed grandfathered. So that means that they will continue to be able to negatively gear the investment properties they already own. And it won't apply to existing properties from in the next 12 months, because there's a 12-month transition period, but it'll still be available to new homes to encourage investment in new housing. And now it's also to stop landlords, if it wasn't grandfathered, jacking up the rents immediately, because it will... Although these tax changes to negative gearing, they're not being sold as a tax grab, but they are. So what they are being sold as is intergenerational fairness, equity. So the idea is, and this won't happen overnight, but the idea is that more first home buyers, young couples, will be able to buy a property, the Great Australian Dream, as it used to be called, and they won't be crowded out miss out because of property investors. And now the reason we hear this term intergenerational equity, it's this in Australia, the main battle lines. It's not between genders or even different racial groups. Though there's plenty of as you would call it, different racial lobbies, but the main battle lines are intergenerational. So boomers, they're largely seen as entitled and wealthy people who are hoarding all of the wealth and property, particularly from millennials and also Zoomers. And so this, even though they'll still get the same tax treatment on their existing negative geared properties, the boomers, it won't be available to new property investors. So the boomers, they'll always get unless they offload their new investment property. And now there's also related to negative gearing, there is changes to the taxation of capital gains. So it used to be indexation by inflation every year until Peter Costello changed it in 1999 to a simpler 50% capital gains discount. And now that will be scrapped right away and go back to inflation in adjusted indexation. But that's, although it was mainly seen as distorting the housing market, the reason Howard and Costello changed it is to encourage people to buy shares. But the capital gains discount, it's available to any capital gain, whether it be housing or shares. So it's also going to affect those selling housing. So if you, say, got a $50,000 profit on shares, it used to be that you'd only pay tax on $25,000, or if you sold an investment property for $500,000, you'd be taxed at $250,000. So even though this is meant to deter property investors, basically it's what the message that this government is sending, I would say, is that it's basically morally wrong to be a property investor unless you're going to invest in new housing, unit, apartment developments. Now, Jim Chalmers in his budget speech said that foreigners will still be banned from buying existing property, but they can go for their lives on new housing properties because that they want that type of foreign investment. Now, also, we need to highlight that this is a broken promise by Anthony Albanese and Jim Chalmers. They both repeatedly said during the 2025 federal election campaign that there would be no changes to negative gearing or the capital gains tax.
Now, when it comes to negative gearing, we've made it very clear that that's not something that we are proposing. We have a broad and ambitious housing policy already, and those changes aren't part of it.
Can you rule out any changes to negative gearing and capital gains
Yes.
tax?
How hard is it for the 50th time? I rule out I have responded to that lots of times.
We've said multiple times we won't take the same tax agenda to this election that we took to the last election. We've already made some of that aspects incredibly clear, whether it's negative gearing.
Will you rule out changes to negative gearing and property taxes this term or next?
Well, what we're doing is doing the legislation that we have before the Senate. So I talk about what we're doing, not what we're not doing. I told people we wouldn't make changes. The proof's in the pudding, Andrew. If we were going to make changes, then why haven't we?
Will you consider revisiting negative gearing policy ahead of the election?
No.
So you're completely ruling it out?
I think that was a pretty clear answer.
Will you revisit it after the
I think that was a
election?
pretty clear answer that I gave.
So they couldn't be any clearer, Albanese and Chalmers, during the 2025 federal election. Now, for those who know their Australian political history, Bill Shorten took to the 2019 federal election a negative gearing and capital gains tax changes, as well as reducing franking credits, which is so that you don't get taxed twice on if you receive share dividends, which have already been paid company tax. So he was going to double tax company shares, so the companies would get taxed and you'd get taxed fully on your personal income. Now they're not they're not touching franking credits in this budget, but there is another tax grab from the blue. So a minimum of 30% tax rate will be introduced on discretionary trusts from 2028. So this is sold as trying to hit wealthy Australians, trying to minimise their tax payments through the use of trusts. And now this will, they think that it will raise 4.4 billion over 4 years. Now the capital gains and negative gearing taxation changes, can't seem to find it on the budget summary that I'm looking at here. Remember, I'm just looking, like I said, I haven't had the luxury of looking at the budget papers since they've only been released right now. Though there is going to be, so it's not all a grab. There is also going to be this was already signalled ahead of the budget that there is going to be a $250 tax offset that comes in from next financial year. So you won't get it this year. But there is going to be, and this was promised at the federal election campaign, the instant $1,000 tax deduction, no questions asked, no receipts. If you want to claim more than $1,000 in deductions, you will have to provide receipts. So why has the Albanese government, Jim Chalmers, decided to break these election promises, which Anthony Albanese himself said 50 times? It's as I said, it's because this is the reason why this is being sold as intergenerational fairness is because the voting demographics, the boomers are dying, and obviously a lot of boomers died in between the 2019 federal election and 2026. So they believe that this will be more popular with the new voters than it will be with the old voters. And they got away with breaking an election promise last term when they said they wouldn't touch the stage 3 tax cuts. So they changed them. They sold it as that everyone would still get a tax cut, but those promised to middle higher income earners under stage 3 wouldn't get as much. And they also didn't deliver on a key promise. So that was $250 off your electricity bill. We're still waiting for this in the Albanese government's second term. Now, there is not going to be a budget surplus for another decade. And what makes me laugh about the budget forecast, the forward estimates they're called, is that inflation will be lower in for the years to the end of the decade. And also that GDP will grow stronger. None of us know what is going to happen year after year. Going into 2026 was a global fuel crisis caused by a US-Israeli-led war in Iran. It was that predicted. You can't predict what wars are going to break out in the future, or what plandemic, scamdemic there could be in the future. So they are just completely rubbish, these forward estimates. They're not worth the ink that they're written on. And now, we already knew about the NDIS a rollback or reining in. So that's projected to save $22 billion, even though they're not going to take place until 2028. So it's the aim to reduce the number of Australians on the scheme by 160,000 and have a evidence-based diagnosis on reduced capacity, not just a diagnosis led. So anyone who wants the scheme can go on it. There was, of course, a violent protest by the socialist groups against the NDIS cuts, which they claimed that it was Victoria Police who were brutal against them. But how come it's only ever them who are the victims of police brutality? It's because they started first. You can certainly guarantee that. Now, it was announced by Anthony Albanese last Friday that Melbourne's suburban rail loop, which the eastern section is projected to cost $35 billion. Jacinta Allen, she wants one third to be funded by the state government, one third by the federal government, and one third through value capture taxes, which is tax on housing, apartment developments around the suburban rail loop stations, because it's being sold as a housing, i.e. 15-minute city project. So Anthony Albanese's government had already promised $2 billion for it. Now they've promised an extra $3.8 billion. So that's $5.8 billion in total, which is still just over half of what Jacinta Allen wants. Though the Albanese government, they've given to rail with one hand, but taken away with another. So the inland freight rail, which was going to go from Melbourne to Brisbane, has been cut back to Parkes in New South Wales. Now, this is cost blowouts have been blamed. So the full rail line to Brisbane was projected to cost $45 billion and be completed by 2036. So the scaled back rail will cost $16.25 billion and will be completed by the end of next year. But it's a spite cut because it was Barnaby Joyce's. He was the spearhead behind this project, and now he's with One Nation. It seems that they're wanting to kill what is seen as his project, even though this project would have been more environmentally friendly, less diesel consuming, polluting trucks on the highways, and having it on segregated rails. But it just proves that we can't do any, what's the buzzword, nation building projects. And in fact, there's that Australian satirical show Utopia, and the fictional nation building authority, where they announce things and there is no progress on anything. Senator Slayer, I'm going to put you in timeout because there's those comments are not very nice about my appearance. And now we also had the budget could have been back in surplus just through reining in Communications and Sports Minister Annika Wells' extravagant expenses. So remember, this was triggered by her separate trip to New York to spruik the social media ban at the United Nations. And remember the $100,000 lunches and dinners she had at the Paris Olympics. And this was, you might remember, the number one political story in Australia before the Bondi Islamist terrorist attack. So Annika Wells, she's nicknamed Annika Smells because her expenses don't pass the smell test. So she referred her expenses to the Independent Parliamentary Expenses Authority, and she has been forced to repay taxpayers $10,116 over incorrectly claiming 4 family trips. So this includes when her husband flew to Canberra to pick up their son who'd been isolating with COVID, a family trip to Canberra for her swearing in last year, her husband's return trip to the AFL Grand Final, where Annika Wells was making snow people with confetti for the Brisbane Lions premiership on the ground with the Oz kids. It's like she was a little girl again. And a portion of a hire car to an NRL game that she used to visit family on the way. So this was not family reunion entitlements. So now the total repayments included a 25% penalty loading. But as now the report about her expenses, they called these honest mistakes. They didn't amount to misconduct. However, Annika Wells was cleared over a business class trip from Brisbane to Adelaide to attend a friend's 40th birthday party because it included a meeting with her husband, Chris Picton, the South Australian Health Minister. And of course, this is politicians of all persuasions have tried this trick of having a official parliamentary business while they go to a social event. And now in the budget, there is not going to be the 25% tax on gas exports that independent ACT Senator David Pocock and the Australia Institute, which is a Greens-aligned think tank, were lobbying for. So, but instead, there is going to be a East Coast gas reservation to take effect from 1st of July 2027 with an 18-month transition period. So major LNG exporters must set aside and actually sell the equivalent of 20% of their export volume or production into the domestic East Coast market. That sounds awfully similar to Peter Dutton's election policy. I've just put Senator Slayer in timeout. He'll be allowed back soon. They also copied from Peter Dutton's election policy, a $2 billion funding for councils and state utility companies to deliver infrastructure to unlock new housing. They also copied the pause or rewriting of the National Construction Code to speed up new housing. Now, I'm just going through if there's anything else in this budget which is new. Oh, yes. Well, one of the things that both federal governments do of both of the uni parties is hide in the budget, increase new fee or existing fees and levies. And so Australians departing the country by air or sea will be slugged an extra $80 passenger movement charge. So this is up from $70. So this adds an extra $755 million in revenue over 4 years. You may remember that we also have the most expensive passports in the world. So they are $412. Other, you would say, cutbacks or rollbacks is that Australians aged over 65 with private health insurance will have their premiums increase by $240 a year. And also there is going to be a cutback on the fringe benefit tax for electric vehicles. So this is from April 1 next year, April Fool's Day. Vehicles priced between $75,000. The luxury car threshold of $91,387 will get a 25% discount on their fringe benefit tax, down from the current 100% reduction. So that is most of the budget-related news. Now, obviously, during the federal election campaign, there has been quite the horrors exposed in childcare centres, abuse and neglect. Remember, that was Anthony Albanese's key election commitment, universal childcare, or early learning, as they call it now. But since there have been some former childcare workers convicted of child sexual abuse and some charged, there has been a mass drop-off, understandably, in demand. One of the childcare centre operators, who there was a child abuse linked to some of their centres, has closed 40 of their childcare centres. Now, there has been a push from the National Party, and the Liberal Party is open to this. One Nation, it's also their policy as well, income splitting for couples with dependent children. So a stay-at-home parent can look after young children. Normally, let's be honest, it's going to be the stay-at-home mum. The Finance Minister and Katie Gallagher, also Minister for Women, has rejected income splitting, claiming that the published evidence is the sooner you get a child into early child education or childcare, the better they are prepared by the time they enter formal schooling. Though she did say she is not going to be telling parents what they should be doing with their kids, but she claimed it worked for her. But obviously, the Albanese government is only going to subsidise childcare, not stay-at-home parents. And never mind the fact that she was actually wrong on the data. Now, the Albanese government, one of the questions about their budget is, will it add to inflation, or Jimflation, as Danger Dan calls it? So we had, obviously, interest rates raised by the Reserve Bank to 4.35%. There could be two more by the end of the year. And obviously the inflation to the year ending March was driven by the jump in transport and fuel crisis. But as I mentioned last week, milk, bread, staples are already going up.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
Now, the One Nation MP for Farrer, well, he hasn't been sworn in yet. So David Farley, the MP elect for Farrer, even though he won the seat of Farrer at Saturday night's Farrer by-election, he has to wait for because what happens on election night by the Australian Electoral Commission, it's only called a provisional count. But luckily, all the votes early and on the day were counted. All 94 polling places were returned. So they have a provisional count on the night, and then they have a more slow and methodical official count. And then there's the vote declaration by the Australian Electoral Commission, and then the writs are returned to the Governor General, and then they're sworn in by the Speaker. It's not like the UK where, well, they only have first past the post there. They count all the votes overnight. They all get on the stage, and the returning officer says this person went, and then they're immediately the new member. So David Farley was not in the chamber for budget night, but it will be a moment in Australian political history when he is sworn in, because he will be One Nation's first MP in the lower house elected under the One Nation banner. Because obviously Pauline Hanson in 1996 was a disendorsed Liberal Party candidate because the nominations had closed. She was still on the ballot as a Liberal candidate, and because there was a landslide in Queensland, she still won the seat. Barnaby Joyce, obviously elected as a National for the member for New England, but defected to the One Nation late last year. Now, let's hope that I don't think it would affect the result, but let's hope that the Australian Electoral Commission, unlike the South Australian Electoral Commission, where there were multiple electorates, where they found absent postal votes that they forgot to count. So there is going to be a review into that. But it was very clear from 7:30 p.m., 90 minutes after the polls closed that David Farley had won, easily defeating the runner-up, the don't call her a teal independent, Climate 200 back independent, Michelle Milthorpe. She obviously she couldn't deny that she took Climate 200 money, but she said 98% of my donations come from members of the community. So David Farley won 39.68% of the primary vote, and despite some of the UCOMS polling, which had Michelle Milthorpe in the low 30s, she only polled 28.18% of the vote. You can see the changes in the vote. So One Nation, a 33% swing on the 2025 federal election. And there was only an 8% swing to Michelle Milthorpe. Remember, there was no Labor candidate here. The Greens, they had a 2.7% swing against them, only got 2.25% of the primary vote. Legalised cannabis beat them on 2.3%. And now in third place was the Liberal candidate, Rasia Bowotsky, who is a boring, stuffy, cookie-cutter Liberal candidate, an Albury councillor, a lawyer. The National Party had a decent candidate, Brad Robertson, a ADF veteran, spoke much more plainly, and even though Matt Canavan, the new National Party leader, basically camped out in Farrer for the entire time of the by-election with his swag, still came forth. So Liberals only got 12.37%, a 31% swing. The Nationals could run in this seat because there's no sitting Liberal member with Susan Lay's resignation. They only got 9.7%, but they thought that was a great victory for them, the National Party, and said that they will be back by the next federal election. Now, I was watching the Sky News coverage where they called the by-election for David Farley One Nation very early in the evening, but over on the ABC, they were in a bit of a denial. It was a bit of a funeral. They were in mourning, and of course they were very. They've been triggered for weeks now that the Liberals and Nationals were preferencing One Nation before the independent Michelle Milthorpe. This was the ABC meltdown on the on the election night, and then the next day on ABC Insiders.
A big and dangerous mistake to legitimise One Nation and to embolden One Nation. Here we've had Angus Taylor make a deliberate decision to preference One Nation above the independent, which tonight could really be one of the reasons they get across the line. We'll see as the votes come through, but that will be key. And that will legitimise them, and I used the term earlier on in the broadcast, the permission structure. If they are able to win their first lower house seat, that begins the process of legitimising them. And in other electorates where they may run, voters thinking, well, it's happened before, it's normal now. You start normalising something.
Third over the Nationals,
which also means one less woman for the Liberal Party as well, who already had diabolically low numbers of women in the parliament.
Indeed, indeed.
Well, and also flagging that they would be willing to join with One Nation in whatever kind of coalition.
And for someone like Tim Wilson to say that's interesting.
Exactly. So the Liberal Party would be aligning itself with a party which, at its core, is racist and bigoted.
So that old woman you saw on the ABC Insiders couch is Nikki Sava, who was a Canberra Press Gallery journalist during the dismissal. So she would be at least in her mid-70s. Now, she was a staffer, a Liberal staffer during the, she wasn't, she wouldn't like to call herself a Liberal staffer, but she worked for Peter Costello and then John Howard. But she called her memoir about her time in the Howard government Confessions of a Conservative Lefty. And now she is a full lefty again. She is of Greek Cypriot origin, and like Kos Samaras, a Greek Australian who supports multiculturalism and immigration, and she has this still has this view of one nation from 30 years ago, that the same attack racism is going to work. And of course, she also went on to criticize the Liberal National parties, saying that their performance in the by-election, because they went too far to the right. I remember her saying last year on ABC Insiders, we're seeing the Liberal Party disintegrate before our eyes. But if you see the bags under Nikki Savva's eyes, we're seeing her eyes disintegrate before us. That's mean. She can't help in her old age. Eyelids are sagging. But it wasn't just this old press gallery journalist, Nikki Savva, calling the One Nation and Pauline Hanson racist. So this was in the Sydney Morning Herald on the Farrer by-election day. Australia teeters on the brink of a populist uprising led by a long-time racist. So Peter Harcher he's the international editor of the Sydney Morning Herald. He's been around for 50 years. So these old dinosaurs in the press gallery, they still it can't comprehend. They just think that by the Liberals and Nationals putting One Nation last, like what happened in the late 90s and early 2000s, will just slay Pauline Hanson and One Nation again. But even though they did preference One Nation before the Teal Independent Michelle Milthorpe, the Liberals and Nationals, they launched multiple character attacks on David Farley. They're mentioning constantly that he tried to seek Labor pre-selection in 2022. But I think that he didn't pass the candidate vetting, because he once called Saint Julia Gillard an unproductive old cow. So he's a successful agri businessman. So of course he uses farming analogies there. Now there was that scuffle at a pre-polling booth between a One Nation volunteer, Alan, and the Victorian Liberal Senator James Patterson, who'd gone up over the border to New South Wales to hand out how to vote cards. So he attacked this. When I say he said it was defamation to James Patterson, a National Party corflute that had David Farley in a Labor Party cap and opening up his chest to reveal a red Labor shirt, which is, do you still say it's photoshopped or do you say AI slop? And he said that was defamation. Well, it wasn't a real image. And he said, well, it's true. And James Patterson then got his phone out, and Alan, being a typical boomer, grabbed it saying, you don't have permission to film me, because this is a view amongst boomers that you've got to get permission to film someone's face in public, which of course, it's for a lot of they grew up for most of their lives without every phone being a camera phone. Now, in the immediate aftermath, Pauline Hanson, James Ashby, and David Farley said, they apologised to James Patterson, said that Alan wouldn't be on the booths anymore. But when they saw the footage and they saw the different angles where you could see that James Patterson put it right up in his personal space, that's why it was so easy for Alan to grab it. They withdrew their apology. James Ashby said that James Patterson needed a good kick up the backside, picking on a elderly pensioner, a senator on $300,000 a year. David Farley used another farming analogy, said James Patterson was a mongrel dog looking for a fight. Now, I don't think that the Liberal Party, that it was wise to have come into over a majority rural electorate to Melbourne urban-based Victorian senators, James Patterson and Jane Hume. And now, James Patterson, when the phone was snatched, he said that was assault. He's the shadow defence spokesman for the coalition. Do you think that the shadow defence do you think that the defence ministers, I should say, of Russia, China, and Iran would be basically falling over like a soccer player, saying, "Oh, this is assault." He's a scrawny boy man. His physique is about the same age as me, I think, and I think he's grown a beard to basically make himself look more manly or masculine. He sort of looks like that comedian as Sammy J, who plays the piano and has that puppet that he talks with, that purple one. Maybe Sammy J could play James Patterson in a sketch or reenactment. But I thought it was funny watching Sky's coverage. Andrew Clennell said, "What a wimp," calling that assault. And said, although I'd back him in a university debate, I wouldn't back him in the boxing ring. And I think Joel Fitzgibbon, who was on the panel, former Labor Defence Minister, said that luckily camera phones went around in my day on the booths and said, "Bring back the biff," which is a saying of rugby league fans who like it when rugby league players belt each other. It's certainly that's something unique to rugby league. AFL and soccer supporters don't feel the same way. And I should mention that Joel Fitzgibbon tragically lost his son Jack in ADF parachuting accident, and there's been another one today with another death of a 50-year-old ADF veteran, which is just absolutely heartbreaking. That there's been another training accident. Now, going back to the aftermath of the Farrer by-election, so attacking Pauline Hanson for flying in and out of Albury on a new sexy $1 million plane from Gina Rinehart didn't work. And I think that the Climate 200 links to Michelle Milthorpe, that was founded by Simon Holmes à Court, the son of Australia's first billionaire. Now, remember, the Teals are backed by a wealthy businessman. I think that it was her connections to wealthy Australians that hurt her more. Now, one of the things I also noticed on election night is that Barnaby Joyce, who was there, had a few too many again. He didn't fall backwards off the stage and adopt that position like he did in Canberra when he was on the phone to his wife Vicky Campion. But I knew that he had a few too many when on stage with Pauline, gives her a kiss on the cheek, and he sort of lingers on her face. It was made me really uncomfortable there, seeing him. I thought a bit too affectionate with Pauline there. And have you noticed that Barnaby Joyce in his recent television appearances, especially via Zoom or camera phone, he's much more beetroot in the face, beetroot coloured. His nickname has been Beetrooter because his face is like a beetroot, and Beetrooter because he rooted his staffer, now wife, Vicky Campion. And the Pauline Hanson, in the launch of the Pauline Hanson's Please Explain cartoons, Barnaby Joyce was drawn with a beetroot for a for a head. Now, speaking of the Pauline Hanson cartoons, the MC for the Farrer by-election night was the co-founder of Stepmate Studios, who makes the Please Explain cartoons, Mark Nicholson. It does the voice of Anthony Albanese. They have a new season now where Anthony Albanese's worst nightmare on election night 2028 is a landslide victory to One Nation with Pauline Hanson as Prime Minister. But it's interesting that Pauline Hanson and Barnaby Joyce, they are not campaigning to be the government. They are saying that they're saying they wouldn't join a formal coalition with the coalition. They'd only give confidence and supply. They only want to be a kingmaker. They don't want ministries that would be bound by by cabinet solidarity. So there's been some criticism of them that they want political success but not political responsibility, to where they can actually make a difference in government. I guess they could be in the outer ministry where there's not cabinet solidarity, but should not. I think it's a bit premature to talk about if there'd be a hung parliament in 2028, where like Liberals and Nationals actually have to do better. And Angus Taylor, he is a old school free market Liberal, basically a John Howard, Peter Costello clone, and he doesn't speak from the heart or from passion like Pauline Hanson does. It's scripted, prepared speeches, as was his concession on the Farrer by-election night, including when he said mass migration is not working for Australia. And then he had a new soundbite about if the vote sprays, Labor stays and Australia pays, and we need to get rid of this rotten Labor government. Wouldn't mention One Nation. Now, obviously there is no wasted votes in Australian federal elections in the lower house because we don't have first past the post like they do in the UK. But the issue is preference discipline. One Nation voters historically just decide their own preferences. And I think there's a lot more independently minded coalition voters now, like the low information voters will still take the how to vote card and just go by what the party says. But I still think it was absurd what Patricia Covell said on the ABC, that the how to vote card gave permission for people to vote for One Nation. It was, they don't need permission from a Liberal and National how to vote card. Though she was right, in fact, that with One Nation winning in Farrer, there is this, you would call this this tipping point where, because we saw with the opinion polls that more and more voters were saying, well, saying it became a self-fulfilling surge. Well, One Nation, it's rising in the polls. Pauline Hanson is speaking about the issues that are important to us, and she seems to be gaining support. We'll jump on the bandwagon, and there will be a lot who will see this result and say, hey, it's worth voting One Nation now in my electorate. They can win in my electorate now. And so there will be this cascading effect. Now, will they be competitive in Western Sydney like a drunk, tipsy Barnaby Joyce said on Farrer election night? Maybe in seats like Lindsay and Angus Taylor's electorate of Hume, but certainly not in Watson, Tony Burke's seat. But rural and regional Australia is certainly where and I don't see how the Liberal and Nationals are going to get One Nation voters back. It doesn't matter how much they attack One Nation candidates. Pauline Hanson for supposedly Islamophobic comments and formerly employing a convicted rapist. None of that matters. Use another farming analogy. The horse is bolted. One Nation voters don't care. They don't care about the stuffy Liberal Party's critiques of One Nation anymore.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
I am reading the comments here, but is there any actually serious comments other than about my appearance here? Though at least you're watching, that is the important thing. Now, another new event that certainly you would say would create more One Nation voters is the return of 4 ISIS brides on Thursday evening. Now, 3 of the 4 were arrested by joint counter-terrorism teams. So 2 were arrested at Melbourne Airport, a mother and daughter, Kanzwa Abbas and Zainab Ahmed. So Abbas, who's a grandmother at age 53, faces crimes against humanity, enslavement, and slave trading charges, and her daughter Zainab also faces crimes against humanity and enslavement charges. And now, men acting as security for the other daughter, who was not charged, Zara Ahmed, pushed and shoved journalists and cameramen, including this a slur against a female journalist. We're calling her a slut. Sorry, I thought I had the video there, but I don't. Up in Sydney, Janir Safir, 32, was arrested and is facing membership of a terrorist organisation and entering or remaining in a declared area. The Albanese government, of course, they repeatedly denied facilitating the women's return from the Syrian Al-Roj detention camp. They claim they had a legal obligation to issue the women and their 9 children with passports. They also carried out the DNA tests to issue the passports. And remember, it was the Friends of Tony Burke re-election campaign, Dr. Jamal Rifi, who took the passports over to Syria and gave them to the women and children. There's still more there. Only one has been given a temporary exclusion order. By giving them the passports and allowing them to return, not issuing a temporary exclusion order, they were rolling out the red carpet to these ISIS brides. And a spokesperson for the Syrian government said the Australian government was the deciding factor. They had the ultimate authority. The ball was entirely in the court of the Australians. So the 9 children who have now arrived will be offered therapeutic support and asked to undergo community integration and countering violent extremism programs. Now, the 3 women who have been charged, they have not been granted bail at this stage. Now, it broke the next day on Friday that 4 Melbourne men were charged with possession of violent extremist material for allegedly accessing and distributing ISIS propaganda online. So the arrests of 4 men, they were named Aidan Sawari, Azan Syed, Muhammad Ahmadzar, and Solomon Sawari. So the investigation began when Australian Border Force intercepted one of the men from returning from Turkey and found suspicious content on their mobile phone, and then in 2025, another man leaving for Turkey, they found suspicious content and material on his phone. Now, they were all granted bail in separate hearings at the Melbourne Magistrates Court. So again, the number plate of Victoria is out on bail. So, and it should be noted that the maximum penalty for these charges are 5 years in prison.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
Now, on to the Hunter virus outbreak, which began on the MV Hondius, a cruise expedition vessel operated by Oceanwide Expeditions, a Dutch travel cruise company. Now, we're seeing a lot of sensationalist clickbait, the hysterical mainstream media headlines. Hantavirus. Should we worried that this is the new pandemic? No. Spoiler alert. What is Hunter virus? So it is primarily carried by rodents, i.e. rats, and it can infect humans from rat feces and urine. So it was first recognized during an outbreak in the Korean War. Over 3,000 UN troops developed a hemorrhagic fever with retinal syndrome. It was called Korean hemorrhagic fever. And it was isolated in the mid-1970s in Korea, stripped from a field mouse near the Hantian River in Korea. So it's named after a river in Korea, just like Ebola is named after a river in Africa. And now this particular strain or variant, whatever you want to call it, of hantavirus, which is there's been an outbreak on this cruise ship, is the Andes variant, which is the only known that transmits from human to human. Now, it's endemic to far South America, Argentina and Chile, but this is rare and typically requires prolonged close contact, household caregiving, intimate settings, or close cabins on a cruise ship type setting. They are known as petri dishes. There was an outbreak of norovirus, i.e. gastro, on a cruise ship in the Caribbean, about 200 people there. Somebody is saying that my glasses are foggy. For some reason, it doesn't want to defog. Now, it should be noted that in last year, 2025, the hantavirus Andes variant, there were 229 cases and 59 deaths. So it's endemic to Chile and Argentina. It is not a new or novel virus, but the misinformation from both the the COVID crazies who are still around, they're still wearing masks in 2026, warning about crippling long COVID. So they've been claiming that it's airborne. It will be. It could come into a pandemic, and there's also some of the COVID anti-lockdown vax crowd who are saying, oh, this will be the new scamdemic, we will not comply. There will be nothing to comply with. And the behavior that we're seeing from so-called compassionate people, I am talking about the COVID crazies, who normally they're about, before COVID, they were all about social justice, human rights, human compassion until COVID. Unless you had exposure to a virus, then it's basically screw your humanity and entitlement to humane treatment. And so there has been some real, I would say, nasty comments about the people trapped aboard that ship. So there were at its in total on that ship before it was quarantined. Just going through my notes here. So there were 147 passengers and crew at various points. 94 people were evacuated and repatriated via charter flights from Tenerife on the Canary Islands. Now, I couldn't believe that there were locals protesting this ship. Like, if you're so scared of the virus, why are you protesting in the street if you're so scared? And the mainstream media were trying to freak us out about this virus. They're all like at the world's media is assembled like near the shipping dock. So if the mainstream media journalists and cameramen aren't scared about catching the virus outdoors near the plagued ship, none of us should be worried. So there have been 3 deaths so far, and there are 9 confirmed cases, 2 suspected. Now, I guess the only silver lining of the fact that there are 6 Australians who are going to be returning to Australia is that they will get to stay at one of those white elephant quarantine centres. This is Ballsbrook in Perth, Western Australia. The Health Minister, Mark Butler, confirmed yesterday.
And those 6 people will be transferred immediately to that quarantine facility directly next door to the RAF base. People might recall this is one of the quarantine facilities or the National Centres for National Resilience that were set up at the back end of the last pandemic. It is still there. It is able to operate. It is currently owned by the Commonwealth Government and will be operated in partnership with WA Health. This period of 3 weeks quarantine will obviously only cover part of the 42-day quarantine period or potential incubation period that is understood to be relevant to this particular virus. As we move into that 3-week period, we'll be seeking further advice from the Chief Health Officers through the AHPC about what arrangements should take place beyond that initial 3 weeks. Oh, sorry, yes. There is a virus testing facility at the Doherty Institute in Melbourne that is able to do PCR or serology testing for this virus. So no matter where we were going to place these people, whether they were effectively sent home into New South Wales or into Queensland, which was one possibility, or whether they're placed at least for a period of time at a National Centre for Resilience, they will be subject to testing, and that testing can be effectively operationalised in Melbourne.
So I've seen nasty comments on social media saying the Australians should have been left there. So the Australian government should have abandoned its own citizens on a ship in the middle of the ocean. Now, actually, I commend the actions of the Spanish Prime Minister Sanchez, even though he's a socialist, allowing the boat to dock on the Canary Islands was the compassionate thing to do. But these health fascists, let's just call them that, that's not enough quarantine. They want, because apparently the virus has a maximum incubation period of 8 weeks, which is sort of a dream for these hypochondriacs. So imagine they would absolutely love a pandemic lockdown where everyone would have to be quarantined, close contact for 8 weeks. Like, this is I can't understand it that there were this segment of people who turned into sadistic, cruel people who not only didn't care about the human rights, humanity of people. I wanted those who could be infected put into camps, follow the Chinese model of welding them into doors and having a military-style lockdown. It was the most, I would say, it was one of the COVID lockdowns. How a lot of people behaved was some of the most gave me the most disheartening view of my fellow human. But I don't think we would be talking about hantavirus in even next month. Remember earlier this year, the Nipah virus, there was a couple of cases in India and Bangladesh. In fact, Thailand, where I was traveling to, was screening travelers from India and Bangladesh to see if they had the Nipah virus. So it's a hemorrhagic fever from bats, bat bites or droppings. So, of course, COVID came from a bat. And apparently in Thailand, they found another coronavirus which could potentially affect humans. But this is the whole thing. This new coronavirus they found in Thailand, it's not infecting humans. The hantavirus, the Andes variant, they've done the genomic sequencing. It hasn't mutated at all. It's all of this what if this is what all this clickbait is. What if there is this mutation, it becomes a pandemic? Well, what if the alien invasion finally happens? You can just make up shit about. This is the thing about, you can make a what if this happens. It hasn't happened. So why are you making it hypothetical about something that isn't happening?
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
Now, going international for the first time in a while. I also should add before I start that I think the reason why hantavirus is in the news so much at the moment is because the Iran war is boring, because it's a stalemate and fuel prices are not basically at apocalyptic, unaffordable levels. Now over to the UK, where it's kind of, at the moment, it's sort of a fluid situation, the future of a British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, after the British Labour Party's disastrous results in the English local government elections and in the Scottish and Welsh Parliament. So this is what happened. So Reform had a net gain of 1,451 councillors. Labor lost 1,496. The Liberal Democrats gained 155. The Conservatives lost 563. So I don't know why Kemi Badenoch was celebrating or why she's still in a job. The Green Party gained 587. It's funny, all these Islamists voting for the Green Party, led by a gay Jew in Zach Polanski, who he's the second most famous Polanski in the world now. Labour also lost 4 seats in the Scottish Parliament. Reform gained 17. The Scottish National Party, though they lost 6, lost their majority. Though in Wales, how do you say it in Welsh? I should know because my maternal grandfather was Welsh. Placet Siramu. Dawn, who's a Brit here, can you basically post the pronunciation in the chat? They are short of a majority, so they are a Welsh nationalist party. Of course, nationalist parties in Celtic countries, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland, are left-wing parties. They don't like the English, but they like mass migration. Labour lost 35 in the Welsh Parliament. So basically, devolved government was invented by Tony Blair in 1997 to basically have Labour permanent majorities. Now they've lost them. I think the Welsh Labour brand was tarnished forever by the Welsh COVID tyrant, Labour's Mark Dickford Prickford, who had a rapist for a son. The Conservatives didn't do too well in Scotland or Wales. They lost 19 seats and lost 22 seats in Wales. Though the Liberal Democrats got 6 in Scotland and one gain in Wales. Now, Keir Starmer is already the most unpopular British Prime Minister since polling began. So he is at minus 58. He only won the 2024 general election because he wasn't the dysfunctional Conservative Party. He wasn't Rishi Sunak. It was a vote against the Conservatives, not for Labour. Keir Starmer has never been popular. He's never been charismatic, but replacing him with his former deputy, Angela Rayner, who had to resign because of a dodgy tax on her housing, claiming it for her disabled son. There is also another potential successor is Wes Streeting, the health secretary, who would be the first openly gay British Prime Minister. A lot of people suspect that Sir Keir Starmer is what's the nickname? Queer Keir, because there is, it's ongoing at the moment, the trial of the 3 Ukrainian male models who in May last year are accused of perpetrating arson attacks on Keir Starmer's North London homes and a car. Roman Lavagorangich, 22, Ukrainian model, Petro Pochyonik, a 35-year-old Ukrainian model, and Stanislav Karpuk, a 27 Ukrainian-born Romanian model. Now they have been they've been charged with conspiracy to damage property by fire with intent to endanger life or arson. But the theory goes that it was Keir Starmer who was arsoning them. So George Galloway, Katie Hopkins have speculated that they were scorned rent boys who Keir Starmer stiffed. Obviously, he stiffed them if he had sex with them, but stiffed them with payment. So it was they speculated a revenge attack. But according to the Crown Prosecution Service, which Sir Keir Starmer used to be the chief prosecutor, that's how he became Sir Keir Starmer, they have claimed that it's a Russian-speaking contact on Telegram using the pseudonym L Money, Ukrainian for money, was paying and coordinating them. So their theory is that it was Russian coordinated because the communications between the 3 Ukrainian male models were in Russian, even though most Ukrainians can speak Russian. Volodymyr Zelensky, he can speak Russian, sort of similar to how Thai and Lao people can understand each other. Thai and Lao are very similar. Obviously, I'm using this analogy because I went to both Thailand and Lao, and it's sort of a bit like the difference between these sorts of languages. It's to use an analogy, it's sort of the difference between mainland German and Swiss German. They're slightly different. That's sort of the difference between Ukrainian and Russian, basically. I'm summarizing it there. Now, shouldn't this be a national security story reported by the BBC and Sky News UK that a Russian agent paid the 3 Ukrainians to attack the British Prime Minister's properties? But it is hardly getting any mainstream media attention, which seems strange. Now, the Crown Prosecution Service said they don't need to prove a motive of L Money, just that that is the motive for the Ukrainian models arsoning Keir Starmer's home and car. So they're telling the jury, disregard the motive. So they don't have a smoking gun to say that this was a Russian operation. So why the de facto mainstream media blackout if if the theory is that it was a Russian attack on the British Prime Minister's properties, why the basically cover up, the mainstream media cover up, and why were models chosen? Are they saying that Russia is so sophisticated at disinformation that they decided that to hire 3 Ukrainian models to make it look like that Ukraine was attacking the British Prime Minister's property, or to make it look like he paid them for gay sex? Now, there of course is another weird relationship Keir Starmer has with that gay Muslim Lord Ali, who bought him clothes and glasses, and in fact, Keir Starmer stayed at Lord Ali's penthouse during lockdown. In fact, gave a lockdown address from Lord Ali's penthouse and dressed it up to look like his own home. So that's also going on while the media's attention is on Keir Starmer's future. So 70 backbenchers have called for his resignation. There has been a minister who has just resigned, but he is digging in, saying that he's going to get on with the job. In my opinion, the possible replacements, they are all hopeless. It is what the Labor Party is offering. I mean, their signature legislative policy this year was the smoke-free generation legislation, which, of course, was Jacinta Ardern first introduced that in New Zealand, legislated that in New Zealand. Thankfully, it was repealed by the National New Zealand First ACT Party government. So the smoke-free generation bill. So what it entails is that anyone born after January 1, 2009 will not be able to purchase cigarettes. So basically raise the legal age of purchasing each year. Now, it was initially opposed by Rishi Sunak when he was the Prime Minister. Now, Kemi Badenoch, the current Conservative Party leader, she was against it when it was announced by Rishi Sunak. It was a free vote for Conservative MPs. So there was 23 who voted in favour, 35 who voted no, and the rest were abstentions. Now, obviously, Reform has explicitly pledged to repeal this legislation. Nigel Farage, of course, is a huge fan of a cigar, and it seems to be an obsession of this British Labor government to basically go after fun at the pub. There was that legislation that it's conversations at a pub, if they were overheard, could be reported to the police for hate speech. Now, if you want to know how a smoke-free or various policies to reduce smoking rates have gone, just look at Australia with the sin taxes raised to absurd levels. So that is a contributor to the fire bombings we see in Victoria. Now they are getting less revenue from tobacco taxes because there's a flaw with the you're not going to eliminate smoking. There's still not as many, but there are still young people who take up smoking. And a lot now are getting what's called the chop from the weird store on the main main street there. And if that's why all these tobacco wars are happening there, so they're getting less revenue, spending more on enforcement. But because the federal Albanese government, they're committed to the nanny state and don't want to admit they're wrong, the coalition, they do want a reduction in the excise. Of course, the health fascists, the nanny state lobbyists said, if you cut the taxes, that would mean more people would die from smoking. They're smoking anyway. They're just not wanting to pay $2 a packet, $40 for a packet of 20. That's what's happening here. So good thing about Prime Minister Nigel Farage, who hasn't been hurt in the same way that Pauline Hanson has in Australia by supporting Trump. One good thing about Prime Minister Nigel Farage is he'd scrap all of this nanny state legislation, bring back fun in the pub. And of course, that's one of the great the great things we inherited from Britain. Not just fish and chips, which of course Pauline Hanson was a fish and chip shop lady before politics, but the pubs as well. Pubs in Australia, the reason they're declining is because of cost of living and increased alcohol taxes. That is another contributing factor speculated to the firebombings of nightclubs and cafes in Melbourne, illicit alcohol trade, because they're constantly increased as well, the sin taxes on beer and alcopops in particular. So you got to make a pint in the pub of beer or hard solo more affordable again as well. I don't drink as much these days in my middle age as I did in my youth. But I think certainly there's nothing wrong with a few drinks. You shouldn't be taxed into poverty for it.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
And that brings us to the end of another WilmsFront Snapshot news program. And now, as you would be all aware by now, I am a contributor to Reality Check Radio in New Zealand. So my latest Wilms report is up on Reality Check Radio from this morning. I put the link into the live chat, and they are expanding into Australia now. So a social media personality, Lisa Jane Spencer, is now a Reality Check Radio host. She's based on the Mornington Peninsula here, and she was admonished by Sky News Zionist host Chris Kenny. She was for a question to Malcolm Roberts about whether the Bondi attack was a false flag, and Malcolm Roberts said that he had no evidence. He said, "I'm not ruling it out." And Chris Kenny said Malcolm Roberts should either apologize or be kicked out of One Nation. So that was Reality Check Radio getting some media attention in Australia. And for the record, I don't believe that the Bondi Islamist terrorist attack was a false flag. I believe ASIO dropped the ball in watching the younger accused gunman, Naveed Akram. But Malcolm Roberts, he has said that there's no evidence to point to a false flag. I think that the mainstream media, they were more upset that he platformed this Lisa Jane Spencer and didn't immediately walk out of the interview saying, "You're some crazy woman." Now, they've also, another Australian host they've got is Graham Hood, the ex-Qantas pilot. Alan Joyce, the ex-Qantas CEO, has got a new book out called Riding the Jet Stream, and he's promising to set the record straight. The amount of innuendo jokes about riding the jet stream and setting the record straight is maybe the wrong person to get something straight. And I think that's a response to Joe Aston's book, The Chairman's Lounge. So it's great that there's another Australian host, and they're expanding their Australian operations, because there's nothing like reality check radio in Australia. Sky News, The Spectator, Rebel News Australia, they basically have the approved talking points. You can also sign up to their Australian weekday newsletter, Australian Bites. So at biteme.news, what's really going on in Australia and New Zealand. So certainly sign up, watch RCR shows, not just my Wilms Report, every fortnight. Now, of course, I encourage you to support the Unshackled itself, so you can take out a subscription over on our Substack, where we send out news alerts for upcoming shows and news articles, or you can also a premium membership on the unshackled.net/membership, where you can also send a direct donation there. And it's good that many people in the chat have, like Dawn, have confirmed that they're a financial supporter now. It all certainly helps. And there'll be a fresh report from Tiger Mountain with Richard Wollstonecroft released later in the week. Thank you so much for watching. I wouldn't say thank you for all of the comments, though some were constructive. But thank you, everyone, for making the time. And I will see you all again on the following Tuesday. I've got to be careful of how I choose it. And my message now is look out for each other. And don't doom scroll or doom post, particularly about the Hunter virus, because it's nothing to worry about. Although it wouldn't be a good side effect would be if there was a mass extermination of the rat population in Melbourne. Just get a flame torch and exterminate them all, because nobody likes rats. Do snakes like rats, or do they prefer mice? I guess the tiger snakes and the other non-venomous snakes, they have to eat something. So, like I said, I try not to let things get you down. I just look out for each other, and I try and keep optimistic, and just look out for things in your own life as well, because I think that that's the best we can do. Good night, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to WilmsFront. Visit timwilms.com to view the archive of episodes, and keep visiting the unshackled.net to view all our shows, and to keep up with the latest real news and